Vlog number 24. Thanks for joining me, and a lot to get to after a crazy session at the Atlantis on a Thursday night. Believe it or not, and I never thought I would see the day where this would happen, but there was a point in this game where every single player in the game was familiar with this vlog. I thought that I could be doing this for 10 years, and that would never be the case, but it was just a bizarre confluence of circumstances. I'll have more on that coming up later on. So in terms of how things actually played out during the session, let's run through a couple of quick hands here. And the first couple show a common problem when it comes to poker in 2018. So the first hand, a really good player opens an early position to 15, and I call in the low jack with ace queen off suit. The cutoff and the button, as well as both blinds, make the call as well. The flop comes out ace king 9 with 2 hearts. The blinds check, the original razor checks, so it's over to me. I bet $40. Thinking there's a lot of hands I'm going to be getting action from here, and to my astonishment, nobody has any of those hands as it folds around quickly and I pick up a small pot. But the point is, as Abe Lyman said, the problem with ace king is that everybody puts you on ace king, so that makes ace queen even worse. The funny part was, though, 2 hands later I open ace queen of diamonds, and the button makes the call, and the big blind, who's the player I'm really looking to play a lot of hands with, makes the call as well. Flop comes out ace king 9. This time 2 hearts as well. Basically the exact same flop.
And I messed up part of my initial recording, so I'm going back in voiceover style to point out the rest of this hand, which is actually more interesting than I had initially remembered. I had made that $40 bet and the button had folded. The big blind actually does something really interesting. And take a look right here, you can see it in my video. He pump fakes, then he pulls it back, he's very unsure, and finally he settles on indeed making the call. So needless to say, I'm happy that he's made the call here. He is a player that I've seen Hollywood in the past, but not in that way. I really thought this was a sign of weakness. The problem was, I proceeded to kind of screw this situation up. Perhaps. I'm not sure what all of you would think. But I was so convinced that it was a sign of weakness that I decided, after he checked the turn, that I was going to check it back and try to induce a bluff on the river. And I'm not worried about getting drawn out on hardly ever, because I know he doesn't have hearts. Otherwise, he never would have tanked when it comes to calling on the flop. So the river comes a 4, and it does not complete the hearts. And he checks again. Now, I have no choice but to value bet. So I make it 90, and he throws his hand away pretty quickly. So I definitely regretted not betting the turn once the river went like that. But I do think, given the amount of weakness that I saw and given the opponent in question, that me showing some weakness too wasn't the worst play.
A more interesting hand happened when a player under the gun makes it 15. And this is when the game had actually gone down to being 5-handed. I make the call with king queen of diamonds. The big blind calls as well. And the flop comes out 6-7-3 with 2 diamonds. The big blind bets out 25. And he's only got about 150 left. Under the gun makes it 75. And now there's a couple of different directions I can go in terms of how I want to play this. I think if I just call the 75 and I hit my hand on the turn, it's going to be fairly difficult to get a lot of action. But I also think that there's a chance that I can go ahead and raise here, given the fact that the big blind is so short stacked that getting it in with him isn't really that detrimental at all. I'm going to be favored over quite a few hands he has. Even if he has an overhill like pocket 8s or pocket 9s, I'm favored over those hands. So I'm thinking maybe I can actually get the best of both worlds, where I can just get all in against the big blind and get under the gun to fold. He had about 400, maybe 500 left. So, and despite the fact that he had raised a bet post-flop, which is generally not a good sign in terms of the likelihood of them folding, he's a player who I actually thought was capable of making the fold. He has respect for my game. I think he's seen this vlog, so I decided to go ahead and take the chance. And I do go ahead and make the raise to 200. And as I mentioned, I thought I was going to get action on this, especially from the original bettor here who led out onto this, but not the case. 2 more folds. So 3 hands on this vlog, and all of them go by way of winning without a showdown.
Get to making with jive, boy. When it hits you, yes, indeed. Yes, you shall. When it hits you, yes, indeed. Yes. When it hits you, yes, indeed. Yes, you shall. When it hits you, yes, indeed.
So the game at that point, as you can see, was not all that wild, but we had, well, a massive fish jump into the game. And as a result of him being there and a couple of other unknowns who played fairly wild, they were in there as well. The game just started getting very wild. So it reached one of those times where I'm going to start playing more hands. I've got to get involved with some of these guys. And this next hand is a classic example of that, playing a hand where I normally would not play it because the game is getting better. So under the gun makes it 25, and I'm in the hijack with Jack 8 of diamonds. Again, not a hand I would normally play, but the game's getting good. I'm going to go ahead and take a shot. So I make the call, and the flop comes out Jack 8 4 with 2 hearts. Big blind checks. And again, that's the guy who I'm really trying to play this hand against, but this player who raised it under the gun, who's a guy who is always going to have a strong hand if he's betting into a multi-way pot, I believe, he makes it 60. So I am firmly believing that he has an overpair here and that I'm in a pretty good spot to make some money, even though this wasn't the guy that I really intended to be playing the hand against. So he makes it 60, I make it 155. And that's been a raise size that I've been very fond of over the years that seems to work out well for me. There's just, basically here's what happens, I've noticed. A lot of the times if you min raise, if you get a bet like that, a $6 bet, right, and you min raise to 120, obviously you're always going to be getting called. It sure seems like, but if you make it exactly 100 more, like if you go from 60 to 160, there's something about the fact that it's a whole $100 more that makes people fold more. So I try to split that dynamic. I try to go right in the middle. So rather than min raising and not going as high as 100 more, I like going just below 100 more. So I make it 155. And they realize, well, you know, it's less than $100 more. I think I can go ahead and call. Well, you can actually throw that out the window because that didn't end up happening at all. The guy who, again, I'm in there because he's playing every hand and he's one of the biggest fish that you'll ever see in Reno. He goes ahead and shoves all in. And that was for about 225. So just what I'm hoping happens, happens. Credit to this guy under the gun. Good player that he is, apparently an online background. He folds, and I went on to find out that he had pocket aces. I obviously snap called, and then he actually turned the hand up because it was an all-in. So I saw that he had the aces, made a very good fold, and I was heads up against this guy under the gun who actually had a much better hand than I thought. He had Jack 5 of hearts. I think I said under the gun, big blind obviously, but he had Jack 5 of hearts for a pair and a flush draw, which he's going all in with a lot less than that, I can tell you that, but in this case I ended up holding up and winning a nice size pot there. Unfortunately for me, and I don't have the specifics written down, so I don't want to relay the hand, but I ended up losing with a 10 high flush. I had 10-8 of hearts, and I lost it against Jack 3 of hearts. Against one of the other guys in this game who obviously won in the game, so I lost several hundred in that hand, so I kind of wiped out my gains that I've had as a result of that hand. Shortly after that, we get a limp, and the cutoff, who's on my immediate right, the guy who had laid down pocket aces in the other hand, he makes it 20. I'm on the button with ace jack off suit, and I make the call. And the flop comes out just as you'd want it. King, queen, 10, rainbow. It gets checked to me. I thought we'd actually get a continuation bet, because this flop sure seems to favor the range of the guy racing pre-flop, but we don't. It gets checked over to me, and that calls in the question of how much should I bet into a three-way pot here. I settled on a bet of $40. Both the limper and the cutoff, who would raise pre-flop, make the call. The turn is an 8, and now the limper, who is in the hijack, and is this guy who, again, is kind of a legend. He's really a Hall of Famer. You know how in sports, Hall of Famers are the best players? In poker, Hall of Famers are absolutely the worst players. And this guy's first ballot. So he goes ahead and shoves all in for 120. The cutoff shoves all in as well for 300. Obviously, I snap call. River comes a deuce. And I ended up busting 2 players in this hand.
Oh my god. No more action, players are all in.
The cutoff went on to say that he flopped top set, and if that's true, I didn't see it, but I don't think he's the kind that's going to lie, and I don't think he's the kind that's going to get it in light. He ran really bad, because I was able to get him when he had aces in the other hand, and I was able to get him when he had a set in this hand. So, unfortunate for him, but he's a good player, and I'm sure he'll bounce back. So, busting 2 players there, but here's the really interesting thing about the session, and it's that it went on till about midnight, and shortly after 11 o'clock, every other player had left, other than a rare collection of young guys. Now, I got some video of this. Let's take a look around here. We have Adam, who I've known for years, and he's a friend of mine, and he's a local pro here in Reno. Mason, who I've only known for the last year or two, but he is one of the best players in town. Andy, I think he's a meteorologist, not the TV variety. We got Jaime, who's a dealer at the Atlantis and a guy who knows how to play a number of games well and has told me that he's recently seen this vlog. Then we have Andrew, who is the highest IQ guy of anyone I know and has become a good friend for the last 3 years that he's been here playing professionally. And we got Dan, who's a really good poker player and a crusher of a sports bettor.
So the story is this game always starts in the morning with an average age of about 70. And players have to be slowly replaced for anything like this to happen.
Really slow.
A horrible game. I would never just sit here and play against all these guys unless it was money that was inconsequential. But it's funny how that ended up being the case after everyone else either left or busted. So shout out to those guys, all of which know this vlog. And a situation that you're just rarely ever going to see. So that was pretty cool there on Thursday night. Before I wrap this thing up, by the way, how about those Vegas Golden Knights? Absolutely on fire right now. Ever since Nate Schmidt came back, they've been basically unbeatable. And the good news is they've played like 6 more games on the road than they have at home. And they've been unbeatable at home ever since they became a team. So everyone who wrote the Golden Knights off, reconsider that, because they have their best defenseman back. Their goalie, Marc-Andre Fleury, is playing out of his mind. William Karlsson's starting to heat up. Max Pacioretty is proving to be one of the top goal scorers in the Western Conference. Plenty of things are going their way despite a very slow start in Vegas. So that is also pretty cool. Anyway, I'm going to go anchor a show. I appreciate everyone for joining me. And we'll have another one of these vlogs in a couple of weeks. If you have not subscribed to this channel, do me a favor and please do so. I'll see you next time.